Ready? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the meditation session and talk this evening by our teaching monk, who is Lumpi Nicholas. Sorry, I don't know his last name, but Nicholas. So I'd like to welcome new. We've got some new people. Just one person. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole drill then. The loser at the back, the ladies on this side, and then fire exits, 2 here and 2 at the side at the back. So the format of the evening is generally 45 minutes for meditation. We're given the option of a break, but in these COVID times, there's not much to have a break in terms of refreshments and that. So we just carry on with what's called a Dhamma Talk, which is generally either sort of Buddhist scriptures or Buddhist way of life, and the opportunity to ask questions. So you're all seated, so I don't have to tell you about paying respect to Buddha with pointing our feet. If we're sitting cross-legged, we cannot point our feet towards Buddha. It's a sign of disrespect. You're very welcome to wear a napkin, but actually if you've got over your lap, if you're a lady, but generally if you've got trousers on, it's no big deal. So if we can start then, I'm sure I've covered everything, so time to start? Okay, so we'll just wait for our teaching monk to get kneeling, and only if you want to, please pay respect to Buddha by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow. And now if you'd like to join me in paying respect to our teaching monk for the evening by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow. Thank you.
So welcome everyone to the Thursday evening class. And the program for tonight, I'll spend a few moments giving a little bit of an introduction for anyone who is completely new to meditation, and then normally we settle for about 45 minutes of meditation on a Thursday. After that, we usually move straight on to wisdom talk, and today the topic will be about the Buddhist precepts or self-discipline, and there's a chance at the end for any questions if anyone dares to ask in front of everyone else. If not, you can always ask me by coming up to the stage at the end, if it's more convenient for you. But meditation generally, it is a way we have of working with the mind, where often in our lives our awareness is so caught up with the things around us that it's very difficult for us to come back from all those things competing for our attention in the outside world to a place within ourselves when we need to recharge the batteries of our mind. For some people, their awareness is so caught up with the things around them that even if they want to restore the mind to a sense of balance within the space of the body, it's very hard for them to do that. And meditation offers a variety of different ways to relocate the mind from all those tempting things, distracting things in the outside world back to a space within our body. And this particular diagram shows a place within the body which is particularly effective as a place to refocus the mind, to find balance and equilibrium for the mind. There are a lot of different ways of meditating, but most of them are different methods by which you can internalize the mind. One which you might have heard of before is meditation on breathing, in which case you take the column of air which goes in and out within the space of your body and you focus on your breath as it goes in and out. And that would be an effective way of keeping your mind within the body for as long as it is on the breath. Unfortunately, though, with breathing meditation, since the breath is always on the move, then you're working with a moving target. And for simplicity, in our school of meditation, we tend to favor instead some sort of bright, visualized object as a focus for the mind. And what we would do is conjure up in our mind something like a picture of the sun shining, or maybe a full moon, a star, a diamond, and imagine that that picture is down at that point, which you can see there. It's not really flashing on and off very much. Let's see if we can do it. There we go. Blinking there. Your one doesn't have to blink, but that gives you a little bit more of an idea of roughly where you would visualize the object inside yourself. If your mind wanders away from the object, then you just bring it back each time. And little by little, the mind will build up that familiarity with that point and with the feeling of being centered. If the inner picture disappears, that's not a problem either. You just conjure up a new one. Yeah? And I will say that some people feel the picture more than they see it. Tends to be two camps of meditators, ones who are more visual by nature and ones who are more touchy-feely by nature. Just see which works best for you. As for thoughts in the mind, this is often a major obstacle for people. They can focus, but there's always these thoughts coming in and interrupting the continuity of their concentration. If you find that that's the case for you, then you may need to make use of something known as a mantra. And the mantra suggested in this tradition is the Indian words Samma Arahang. You can see it in the big font there down towards the bottom. And the meaning of those words would be a pure state of mind achieved in the proper way. And you'd hear the sound of those words coming up from the bright object for as long as it takes to cut through the thoughts and settle your mind into silence. If you're not too inundated by thoughts, you may find a more efficient way is just to let the thoughts die down. But in the case that you are dealing with a lot of thoughts, then often the mantra is very helpful. And if you prefer a different mantra, then you can substitute in one of your own. It will be equally effective. But the important thing is that the sound of that comes up from the center of the inner object. So far so good? Generally, when we're sitting for meditation in any particular session, the first 5 minutes is to do with relaxing, getting a good posture. The way we put our hands together is normally with the right hand on top of the left hand, index finger of the right hand up against the thumb of the left hand, just resting palm upwards on our lap. In the first part of the meditation, we scan down through our body, making sure all the muscles are relaxed. And after that, we also relax our state of mind by putting aside any worries or concerns while conjuring up a positive state of mind. And from there, we move on to the exercise of working with that inner object and the mantra too, if necessary. So I'll lead you through the meditation, 45 minutes worth of meditation, so please make yourself comfortable for that. So I'd like to invite everyone to close their eyes very gently. Relax all the muscles of your body and make sure your breathing and your circulation are relaxed and unimpeded. If any part of your body is not completely relaxed, then adjust your body to minimize any possible aches or pains. Try to find a position for yourself by which you feel alert and yet relaxed. And although our meditation is mostly about relaxing the mind, we need to spend a few moments to relax our body first of all. Because if our body is not completely relaxed, then it's going to be difficult for our mind to relax afterwards. So we start by relaxing the muscles of our forehead, our eyebrows and our eyelids, making sure our eyes are only very gently closed. We never squeeze our eyes closed, but close our eyes gently, in much the same way we would go to sleep. From there we relax the muscles of our face, our neck. We can relax both shoulders, both arms, down to the tips of our fingers. Continuing on down, we relax the muscles of our chest, trunk, and our abdomen, both of our legs, right the way down to the tips of our toes, so that all the way from the top of our head, right the way down to the tips of our toes, is completely free of any stress or tension. But if we notice any tension still remaining in our body, then we do our best to relax it as far as possible, until we're left with the feeling as if our body seems to have melted away into the atmosphere around us. Almost as if we had forgotten completely about our body. So that we can turn our attention inwards instead, taking a few moments to make sure our state of mind is relaxed. The easiest way to relax the mind is just to forget for a few moments about all the worries, all the things lingering on our mind from our everyday life. Whether it be thoughts of work, friends, family, school, thoughts of the future or of the past. We put all of these thoughts on one side just for a moment. Rather like clearing up all the documents on our office desk, putting them away in a drawer before locking it with a key. In the same way, we empty our mind completely of any thoughts, and instead we make our mind light, radiant, spacious and refreshed. We fill our mind instead with a sense of happiness and joy, as if tiny particles of happiness and joy completely filled the mind, leaving no space in the mind for any other sort of thought. When we feel relaxed and refreshed, both in body and in mind, very gently, using no effort at all, we imagine that inside our body is just an empty space, with no organs or tissues, no muscles or bones. just a hollow space inside ourselves. Or if you like, you can imagine that your whole body has been transformed to be like a bubble, with the thinnest of transparent skin and hollow on the inside. Again, with no organs or tissues, no muscles or bones. Now, very gently and very slowly, at a point in the middle of our body, we remember back to that picture of the bright, shining sun, which we saw a few moments ago. Maybe yellow or white in color, red or gold, doesn't really matter. And if you can't think of the sun, then think of any other round, bright object which you find easiest to imagine. The important thing is to imagine that object as continuously as you can, for as long as you can, with a very gentle attention. Sometimes we overlook the importance of the word gentle, but often there's a temptation to use too much force when we come to meditate. So we need to be constantly reminded of how gentle we need to be. Some people do the mental equivalent of staring within themselves, which requires using force in their meditation, thinking it's going to help them get better results. But in fact, it only prevents the meditation from progressing. Instead, we need to be as gentle as possible, very light in the way we place our attention at the center of the body. If we find our mind wanders anywhere else, as soon as we realize, we just bring our mind back again to the center of the body as before. If your bright object disappears, you can always think of a new one. But if the object changes in size, shape, color or form, we simply continue to observe at its center, always observing at the brightest spot in the center of the object. And before long we'll start to find that the object will evolve and transform of its own accord, changing to become an object which is more perfect inside us, such as a bright crystal sphere, like a crystal ball, or possibly a bright, clear Buddha statue inside ourselves. In the beginning, for those who are not used to meditation, the mind will be of a nature to wander rather a lot. The sounds around us, the sensations in our body or thoughts in our head may distract us. But our job as a meditator, if our mind should wander, is simply to bring our mind back again to the center each and every time. However many times it takes for our mind to settle at the center. In the beginning, the object which we can observe in our center will not be very distinct. It may seem rather lifeless and maybe as if it's flat and dull. For others, it may be as if we can see only a part of the object. But later, as the mind becomes more settled in the center, the object will become more lifelike. we'll be able to see the whole of the object, as if we were seeing it in 3 dimensions. And the feeling that accompanies observing that object will be different from before. There'll be a sense of joy that arises whenever we're able to see the object. A feeling of joy that will help us to keep the mind on the object the whole of the time. Because if our mind wanders away, then the sense of joy will disappear. We keep our mind always at the center of whatever we see, and what we find is that the object will become gradually clearer, softer, and it may become an object that's not the same as the one which we started out with, because it will be an object which arises spontaneously. Whatever form it takes, we continue to observe at its center, and the object will continue in its journey of transformation to an object which is of a form that we can expand or contract at will. And eventually it will become an object which is so clear and so bright that we know it's something different to what we have experienced before. Often bright, sparkling like a diamond, brighter even than the midday sun, giving a sense of expansion in the mind, whereby we can see that this point at the center is no longer merely just a point anymore, but is the beginning of a pathway like a bright tunnel, which seems to lead ever downwards inside us. And this may or may not have a stream of crystal spheres or Buddha statues inside it. But whatever our inner experience, our job is merely to rest our mind in stillness at the center. As soon as our mind is sufficiently subtle, the mind will go deeper inside, deeper to draw upon all the knowledge or the intuition that is hidden beneath the surface of the mind, along an axis which will eventually lead us all the way to the utmost purity and clarity of the mind as we go. So now, for a few more moments in silence, we cultivate the mind in stillness at the center, with or without a bright object, or simply observing what is already there to be seen. Each their own practice in silence now for a few more moments, until we come to the appropriate time. Forget if your mind wanders off onto other things, no matter whether it be the sounds around you, sensations in your body, or thoughts in your head. As soon as you realize, simply bring your attention back again to the center of your body as before. Always keep your mind at the center of whatever the inner experience is inside. If it wanders away, we can bring it back. If that inner experience disappears, we can conjure up a new one. But if it changes, we just follow it in its new form. And our practice becomes one of observation of the gradual changes in our inner experience. So we continue to remain at the center of that, lightly, gently, continuously, each to our own practice, for a few more moments in silence before we come to time for our loving kindness meditation for today. We continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time, always at a standstill, at the center of whatever inner experience we have built up for ourselves in our meditation so far this evening. For some people, the inner experience arising from the meditation will be rather like a sense of inner brightness, or perhaps like a pinpoint of light at the center of the body. For others, it may be more like a feeling of warmth or well-being at the center of the body, or perhaps inner images, large or small, centered around the middle of ourselves. But whatever sort of inner experience we've built up for ourselves, we touch very gently with our attention at the center of that experience, at the center of the inner experience within ourselves, touching gently with the same lightness of a feather floating down to touch upon the surface of some water, touching so lightly that the feather doesn't even break the surface of the water. In the same way, we touch with our attention at the center of the inner experience within ourselves. We touch that inner experience with just the right amount of effort. What we'll find is that the inner experience of the mind will gradually expand outwards from the point of contact, expanding outwards until it's the same size as the whole of our own body, as if we are sitting inside a sphere of our own well-being or a sphere of our own light. And at this point we can make the affirmation to ourselves that may we ourselves be well and happy, may we be free from all suffering. And touching our mind again at the center of the body, the sphere of well-being or the sphere of light will spread gradually outwards beyond the boundaries of our own body, spreading outward in all directions, just as the moonlight shines forth from the full moon in the night sky, or just as a block of ice sends forth the coolness in all directions around itself into the atmosphere. In the same way, we spread our loving kindness outwards in all directions, spreading that sphere of loving kindness outwards to encapsulate the whole of the room in which we are sitting for meditation, while making the wish that may all living beings here in this room be well and happy, free from all suffering. We spread our loving kindness further outwards still, outwards from the center of our body to encapsulate the whole of the building in which we are sitting for meditation. Again, with the wish that may all living beings here in the building be well and happy, be free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. We spread loving kindness further outwards still, beyond the building, outwards in all directions around us, into the neighborhood around us. Again, with the wish that may all living beings here in the neighborhood be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Spreading loving kindness further outwards still to the whole of this city. And if we find it easier to imagine the city as a map across which we spread our loving kindness, and we can imagine the city in that way, spreading our loving kindness across the whole of the map of the city, in all directions all around. So there's no part of this city not touched by the coolness and radiance of our loving kindness. Again, making the wish that may every living being here in the city be well and happy, free from all suffering, live together in peace and harmony. We spread loving kindness further outwards still beyond the city limits, to the whole of the county, or the country. Spreading loving kindness outwards to the very borders of the country in all directions. Again, with the wish that may all living beings here in this country be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. We can spread loving kindness to the neighboring countries. The whole continent, with the wish that may every living being here on this continent be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Spreading our loving kindness further still to every continent of the world, with that same coolness and radiance. The wish that may all living beings on every continent be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Until our loving kindness spreads across the entire face of this planet. With the wish that every being, whether on the land, in the air or in the sea, be touched by our loving kindness, live together in peace and harmony, that true peace might prevail in our world. We can spread our loving kindness outwards in all directions, into the universe, to the front and the back, to the right and to the left, above and below, emanating loving kindness outwards into the universe around us. With the wish that wherever in the universe there may be living beings, that they too be touched by this coolness and radiance of our loving kindness, in such a way that we can spread our loving kindness without limits, without exceptions. And having spread loving kindness in this way, we condense our awareness back down to the center of our body again, taking careful note of the brightness, the clarity, the feeling of peace and joy at the center of our body. In particular, taking note of the sense of well-being at our center, remembering this feeling as well as we can, because this feeling of well-being is very important for us. It represents a state of progress in meditation that we have reached up until now. If we can remember this feeling as well as we can, the next time we sit down to meditate again, we can pick up from where we left off with this feeling and continue to make uninterrupted progress in our next session. But for now, we continue to meditate for the last few moments of this practice, taking a few moments to note the state of progress in our meditation, remembering the feeling as well as we can for a few more moments in silence. Sape Buddha Balapata Bajeka Nanchayam Banang Arahanta Nancha Dejena Arakam Bandami Sapaso Sapa Buddha Nupavena Sapa Dhamma Nupavena Sapa Sangha Nupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before slowly finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. New folks, okay? Have something to work with? So I will gently move on to our subject for our wisdom talk this evening, which is that of blessing number 9. Some of you have been following the sequence of 38 blessings up until this point. Last Tuesday we just finished up number 8, which was to do with basically craftsmanship. And at this particular point in the study of the Mangala Sutta, we are looking at things which help us to become independent, especially financially, to set ourselves up in life. And the most recent ones we looked at is being basically learned in the theory of how to earn one's living, actually having the craftsmanship to put that into practice. And at this point we come to the part of the earning a living where we start to get a little bit more aware of the ethical consequences of what we might be doing to earn a living. It's all very well being skilled, but if we have no sense of the harm that may come from abuse of the knowledge we have, then that would no longer be counted as a blessing anymore. So this is the point where the ethical aspect, the conscience side of the knowledge comes into play. And generally self-discipline within the context of Buddhism would be equated with things like keeping the 5 precepts. So that will be a part of what we'll look at today. And this topic is something which I have talked about before. Some of you may be familiar with the series I did on Buddhist concepts, in which case there was a talk called Avoiding Unwholesomeness, which I have labeled as B005, and I try to avoid repeating the same things again, and I try to elaborate on some things I didn't go into on that talk to delve deeper into the Buddhist roots of the knowledge. But there is some overlap nonetheless. But the things I'll go into more detail on will be definitions, some scriptural examples, and also the monastic side of self-discipline. So, we said it's to do with ethics, and in earning one's living or becoming financially independent, it's useful to be an ethical sort of person, because otherwise the knowledge we have can bring harm both to ourselves and others. I already hinted that there is a necessity to know about the grey areas in whatever vocation you practice, because in some places you need to know where to draw a line over which you cannot cross without getting into more, let's say, devious or unscrupulous aspects of earning a living. And having an awareness of that is fine, but this is where the 9th blessing comes in to moderate what we've learned already in the 8th blessing. So applying knowledge, mastering one's craft, one needs to have an ethical awareness of how those things might have repercussions for the others around us. Generally, anything to do with self-discipline runs around the idea of not taking advantage of the weaknesses of other people. So if you're practicing your vocation and taking advantage of the weaknesses of other people, then that's would no longer be considered a blessing. Sometimes this knowledge of self-discipline is considered to be rather like a scabbard around a sword, which helps to make sure you don't cut the wrong things. Yes. And it protects the whole sense of human dignity within yourself and in others. In other words, you protect the whole sense of humanity around the way you interact with the people around you. So, knowing where to draw the line in any ethical decision, it's not just a question of right and wrong, although as a meditator you may have a sense about, have a clearer sense of where that line may lie as a result of a meditation practice. If you say it's to do with 5 precepts, yes, you would be right, but that's not the whole story. And within Buddhism, there are lots of lists of things for sure, but in this particular case, it's not a simple question of 5 things to remember, because there are many aspects of culture which may moderate our idea of what may be right or wrong in any particular situation. 5 precepts, they are a way of helping to become aware of when we are taking advantage of the weaknesses either within ourselves or others. But that might not be the only consideration. To give an example, if you were standing on the edge of a riverbank and you noticed that someone had fallen in the water and was drowning, and you did nothing, would that be wrong as a swimmer? What do you think? Just sort of, well, I didn't push them in. A little bit callous, lacking something there. Looking at our 5 precepts, don't kill, don't steal, don't have sexual misconduct, don't tell lies, don't drink alcohol. Didn't break any of them. And this guy fell in the river, and that's their own affair. Something missing. So it brings us to the second line there, which you can see, which is 5 virtues. And 5 virtues are often portrayed as the flip side of the precepts, which means that not only do you not kill things, but you help to have compassion to preserve the life of other things. Therefore, just letting the guy drown, it's not good enough. So where the 5 precepts may not help you to decide in a situation, the 5 virtues do help you. So you have there right livelihood, the flip side of stealing. You have marital fidelity on the flip side of sexual misconduct. You have truthfulness as a flip side of telling lies. And you have awareness as the flip side of taking intoxicants of various sorts. So that would help you in some situations where the precepts don't cover it. So there's more to self-discipline than just the precepts. On top of that, if you live in different areas of the world, there may be different interpretations of ethics. Normally, your precepts and your 5 virtues would give you a pretty clear read on what would be right, generally speaking, but there may be more on top of that which you should also consider in order to do the right thing, perhaps in a local area. Laws differ from country to country, and in some places, some things which might be okay according to the precepts might still break the law of that country. In which case, as long as you're not breaking the precepts, then you should try to keep the law as well. Make sense? Things like this might be things like, let's say, safety laws, or being kind to animals, or not crossing the street in the wrong place. They're not in the precepts. They're not even in the 5 virtues. But you should try to do that, because you have to get along with the other people in your country and be seen as an upstanding citizen. Furthermore, there may be local customs in any particular place, which, if they don't break the precepts and they don't break the law, then why not try to get along with the other people around you and go along with those customs as well. An example of this might be Halloween. We have all these kids dressed up as Frankensteins and ghosts going round looking for sweets. Doesn't break the precepts, it doesn't break the law, and it's nice to have something so the children don't end up in tears when they come to our doorstep, even though we might not believe in Halloween. Yeah? So some things it's good to go along with just for the sort of harmony aspect. Yes. So that would also be considered self-discipline, thinking of the greater good, or thinking of what people generally might do, not just your own self-interest. Yeah. So self-discipline is more complex than just keeping a set of rules that say do or don't do something. It's about a sensitivity for the people around you. And I was thinking that in the old days this might not be particularly clear, but especially since the COVID times and this idea of one person's sort of slipping up, affecting everyone else around them by their infection, it becomes very clear how self-discipline can have a much wider definition sometimes, especially in the age of infectious diseases. Yes. So to define self-discipline, we would say it comes from the Pali word vinaya, which literally means, vi means special or good. Naya means a path. So it's a path leading to something special or something good. There are rules or regulations generally that restrain ourselves in word or deed, not our mind, but what we say, what we do, so the things which are overt for others, to avoid causing suffering for ourselves or others. And they are ideally a state of mind rather than rules to follow. But generally the way they work is that they, by practicing those rules or trying to keep to rules by the letter, then little by little we learn the spirit behind the rules. And to the point that having that sense of discipline becomes internalized for us, so that we can even apply those rules to other things that might not specifically be mentioned in the rules. It's called self-discipline rather than discipline, because it's not about someone with a big stick waiting to punish us if we do the wrong thing. It's more about our sense of satisfaction with ourselves and our own conduct as a result of doing it. So ideally, one would be interested to keep those, keep ourselves to non-exploitation of other people for our own satisfaction, whether anyone else sees us do it or not. Yes. So a little bit different from commandments, for example. The other word which is used for the precepts specifically is the word sila, or shila sometimes. The one here is called shila. But they are considered to be rules of training rather than commandments. So when you start off doing them, sometimes you're not very good at keeping them. Never mind, you try again. You keep trying until you can manage to keep them a little bit more completely than before. So the rationale behind self-discipline, I'm talking about ideals here first of all, is that if you don't slip up into doing things that create bad karma, then no bad karma comes to you. So it's a very easy way of avoiding bad karma. So all you get in your life is like good things, right? Because there's nothing bad to come and spoil it later on, further down the road. So this particular saying from the Dhammapada, if there is no wound in the hand, then one may handle poison. So the poison is nowhere to soak into the cuts in your hand if you have no cut. So even if there might be bad stuff in the world, if you don't get involved with it, then it doesn't come and produce problems for you. Because poison does not affect the person who has no wound. Neither does evil befall one who does not do it. So by avoiding it, just sort of not my deal, then those behaviors don't come back to haunt one later on. And what one would be aiming for, so this is not a set of rules, but what we would like to achieve as a result of following self-discipline is to avoid killing, stealing, committing adultery, telling lies, so that those are specifically mentioned in the 5 precepts. But other ways, malevolent sorts of speech, such as malicious gossip, using gossip to turn one person against another, speaking harshly, so that would include like shouting at people or swearing at them. Also idle chatter, so meaningless speech, also we would try to avoid that, even though they're not specifically mentioned in the precepts. Furthermore, from 8 downwards, we're not talking about things we do or say anymore, we're talking about states of mind. And what we hope to manage, if we can be quite careful about the way we conduct ourselves manifestly, is that even on the inside, our intentions will start to change as a result, so that we are no longer a person who even considers taking things that don't belong to us. So that we're no longer even a person who would consider vengefulness towards others. And we will no longer be a person who sees the world in an inaccurate way. So we can't deal with the mind directly, but by taking care of how we deal with the world outside, the intentions behind what we say and what we do will change as well eventually, until that sense of self-discipline becomes internalized. So that's what we're aiming for, but how we actually manage to achieve it, well, there are 3 ways to do that. Situational avoidance means having a good conscience, an accurate conscience, and in any situation on the spur of the moment being able to, through our discretion, decide what to avoid and what to do. So this is pretty good if you have quite a clear sense of discretion. So sometimes on the spur of the moment, you just know what the right thing is to do. Not the easy thing, the right thing. For some people, though, they can kid themselves. So they can slip up. And that is why, generally speaking, within Buddhism, we talk about the second one mentioned there, which is planned avoidance, which is adopting 5 precepts as a sort of guideline for the sort of things that we would avoid doing in order to preserve our own sense of humanity for others. Third way there, it's called Transcendental Avoidance, is the domain of those who have a very high mental attainment, where their purity of their state of mind is such that any unwholesome intentions no longer arise in their mind anymore, and therefore they are unable to think of anything bad to do to other people, because they just can't think of that sort of thing anymore. They've gone beyond it. So that is a good thing. We can aim for that in the long run, but in the meantime, until we get to there, we better place most of our attention on the planned avoidance part. That's generally the most practical way to build up self-discipline in our lives. So we have this thing called 5 precepts. In the Pali language, they are known as Pancha Sila. So Pancha means 5. Sila means rules of training. And many of the ones that you see there, large enough to read, okay, are also shared with other religions. And the reason for that is that really these 5 rules of training actually preceded Buddhism. They've been around a lot longer than Buddhism has. They're sort of there in sort of ancient Indian culture. And as with many things, the Buddha picked up things which he found useful to adopt as part of Buddhism. So he didn't just invent everything, he picked things which were already there, which he saw were useful to the Buddhist tradition. And this is one example of those. There is the word Pancasila also in Indonesian constitution, but don't get them confused because the 5 things they're referring to there are a completely different set of rules. Okay, just to disambiguate that one. 5 precepts are designed to be kept by Buddhist householders on a daily basis. So they're a fairly simple set of guidelines which are designed for practicality to help you avoid most of the really nasty sort of bad karma. So those 5 have pretty much got you covered. Some forms of Buddhism get the ideals and the practicality of ethics a little bit mixed up and back to front. And there are some, like Thich Nhat Hanh, who have elaborated the 5 precepts so far that they become almost impracticable to keep anymore. For example, he has something which he has renamed his 5 mindfulness trainings, which are basically 5 precepts but elaborated into ideals for the world, which is fine, but it makes it very hard to know whether you've actually managed to keep them or not. So they're there like an ideal instead of being very simple, short 5 rules which I just showed you. I'll read you the first one. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, cultivate compassion and learn ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. So, yeah, how do you know you've not trodden on a stone and hurt it? Yeah, it gets a little bit harder to know whether you've really succeeded in keeping your first precept, let's say. So I would say, generally speaking, we separate out the ideals and the practicality of keeping the rules, and it makes it a lot simpler to actually keep your precepts. Yeah. And the way we make it practical is we have something called the components of precepts, which helps us in situations such as you're driving along in your car on a wet and windy night and a fox runs out in the road. Before you have time to brake, you run it over and it dies. So have you broken your first precept? But it's dead. How come you haven't broken your first precept? Well, the answer is, in this particular case, you didn't have the intention to kill the animal. And in order for a precept to be broken, there needs to be the intention to break it. It needs to be your choice. And there are 5 components like this. I hope the writing's... It's not that small, is it? Firstly, the animal needs to have started out alive before your intervention. Secondly, you must be aware it's alive. Thirdly, you have that intention that it will die. Then you put in the appropriate effort, and it does actually die. So all 5 things need to be there for it really to have been broken. So in Theravada tradition of Buddhism, they are very clear about what it means to break a precept. Why? Because people can then be confident, if they have managed to keep the precept, that my precepts are in order. And for each of the precepts, so this is for the first one, to do with killing. For things like stealing and so on, it would be like actually removing something from where the owner would find it. And, all the precepts have that detail there, which you can study in order to be strict in your precepts. If you happen to break a precept, what do? Well, you make the intention to do better next time. And then sometimes you can go to a monk and ask to be given the precepts all over again to do for a redo of your precepts. If you are at home, if you don't happen to have a monk around, then you can just repeat the precepts and make the intention to keep them better next time round. Yeah? That's how Buddhists actually go about keeping the precepts. You may ask, if you just unintentionally killed a few things, it doesn't break the precepts, does it mean that it doesn't create any karma? There is some karma there. But we have the cutoff line, so for the sake of argument, then we usually work with precepts rather than karma, which may or may not be incurred by minor sort of incursions into breaking the precepts. Yeah? Beyond 5 precepts, there are some other sets of precepts within Buddhism. The 8 precepts is generally what is kept by lay people when they are either on a meditation retreat or sometimes on particular days of the week in order to just have a particular day when they are more strict in their precepts. Above that, which I won't go into today, there are 10 precepts which is for novice monks or for the children who become monks. And then there are monastic precepts which are usually in the hundreds, a set of precepts in the hundreds. But I'll come back to those on another day. 8 precepts, for those who are unfamiliar. Again, not killing, not stealing. The 3rd precept, instead of being outside of a marriage, would be any sort of sexual activity. 4th precept, 5th precept, the same. And then there are some additional ones which are not eating after midday until the next morning. So you're on 2 meals a day. The 7th one is not to engage in dancing, singing, music, going to see entertainment, wearing garlands, so basically decorating yourself, using perfumes, beautifying the body with cosmetics. So the sort of things which people would do if they're on a meditation retreat in order to make themselves less conspicuous. Lastly, not sleeping on a high or a luxurious bed. So generally the sleeping arrangements on most of our meditation retreats are rather sort of not exactly Spartan, but let's say not exactly luxurious either. So no 4-poster beds with mattresses as thick as your leg. Yeah. Okay. So those, the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts, they are generally the domain of lay people. So 5 precepts would be the basic set of rules which most Buddhist lay people would try to uphold. And then for special occasions or for retreats, they might upgrade to 8 precepts in order to clarify the mind on a special occasion. As for the others, then I'll come back to that in another session, whatever my next session is with you. But today I'd like to leave you with a story. And as it happens, both of the stories which I could dig up concerning the precepts or self-discipline happened to concern a sort of creature known in Buddhism as a naga. Naga. Well, I'll show you this picture first, before you accuse me of being too much out there or too woo-woo. Okay, ever seen this sort of animal before? Pretty weird, right? Looks like a sea monster. I'm not saying this is a naga, but what I'm trying to say is that there are some things in the sea or in the water which we, even in our present and modern day and age, we have no idea about. This one is called an oarfish, but rather like a naga, it's very long, bigger than a person, and one of the mysteries of the sea, which we are still discovering as time goes on. This sort of creature is rather similar to what in Buddhism is known as a naga. But nagas in Buddhist cosmology are a low level of heaven realm where beings have the ability to switch between this sort of appearance and human appearance. And when they're in that sort of appearance, they can go and live in a place basically under the sea, in a place which is their own domain, okay? When they're in human form, they look a little bit like this. So human, they can pass for human. And if you look back in my 31 Realms talk, you can see they often look like very large serpents when they're in serpentine form. If they are in human form, when they fall asleep, they go back to looking like a snake again. Yeah? Lost you, I can tell. Okay. The story today is from something called the Buddhidatta Jataka. And it's about one of these forms of creatures who, although it's dangerous for him to take human form and to come into the human realm, he does it anyway because he finds it the best way to follow the precepts when he wants to cultivate the precepts. In this case, 8 precepts. Because some Buddhists like to keep 8 precepts on the quarter moon days. So this one, the Buddhidatta Jataka, here's the actual guy, turned into a serpentine form in this particular case. The person in the picture is a hunter, and it comes from the 543rd Jataka. You can remember, of course, how many Jatakas there are in total? 547. So the fact this is 543 means it's pretty close to the final lifetime of the Buddha before he became the Buddha. So quite advanced, and yet he's still in the serpentine form. In fact, in human form, he would be called Prince Buddhidatta. So it's called the Buddhidatta Jataka. And this prince, together with his father, regularly went to... the prince was born half... his father, on his father's side, was human, but on the mother's side was one of these Naga women. So his mother could shapeshift between human form and serpentine form. So when he was born as a sort of half human and half Naga, then he had this ability too. But he and his father used to go and discuss matters not on this first level of heaven, but the second level of heaven where people have proper angelic form. No more of this sort of snake-like appearance. And he saw that his own status compared with this second level of heaven was inferior. And he aspired to one day be reborn in a higher level of heaven than this snake-like form. So he resolved to keep the precepts in order to upgrade his karma so that he could have a better rebirth next time round. And the way he did this would be that he would keep the 8 precepts especially on the full moon days and on the new moon days. And in the beginning, he used to do this in his Naga kingdom. It was like his kingdom, so it should be quite peaceful. But it turned out not to be peaceful at all because they have lots of distractions in the royal palace, like dancing girls and that sort of thing, which are not suitable for 8 precepts. So he thought a calmer place to keep my 8 precepts would actually be in the human realm. So off he went to the human realm, and he used to wrap himself around a very large anthill or termite mound that you can see in the picture, because no one would bother him there. But the sight of such a huge serpent like that attracts attention eventually. And he had his location betrayed to a hunter who was also a snake charmer. And generally, if you have a snake in a basket, then you can make quite a good show out of that. But if you have a snake this size, then definitely people are going to come from miles to see whatever you're performing. So normally Nagas are very dangerous. They have terrible poisons and magic powers and all sorts of things. But if a spell is put on them, then they lose those powers. So this particular snake charmer took advantage of the fact that the Naga was on his day for peaceful keeping of the 8 precepts and wasn't vindictive at all, put a spell on him, captured him, subjected him to all sorts of pulverizing in order to break all his bones, and then put him in a basket and set off to do his performances around the kingdom. So in order to keep his 8 precepts pure and not to lash out in anger, which would break the precepts, right? Well, and break the first precept if he harmed the guy. So he had to endure all sorts of humiliation, whether it be dancing, changing his size and shape and color in front of the audience, breathing smoke and flame, hoping that if the snake charmer made enough money out of him, then he would let him go in peace. But the snake charmer got greedy, and having made quite a lot of money out of the first performance, he wanted to have more such money. So he paraded him all around the kingdom, all the way up to the royal palace, in fact, in order to get fame and fortune as much as possible out of this exotic creature that he had managed to capture. But at the end of the full moon day, when he didn't return to his palace, his mother started to worry about him and sent his relatives to get him back, to cut a long story short. And eventually they got him back, and he was able to eventually, through the strictness with which he had kept his precepts, not lashed out, not used his magic powers in order to destroy those puny human beings, he eventually lived to an old age, and at the end of his life he was able to go to a better rebirth, which he had worked throughout his life to do. So that is the story of the Buddhidatta Jataka, which in Buddhism is taken as an example of how the Buddha-to-be was strict in his precepts in order to eventually perfect himself towards Buddhahood. Yes. For those of you who are new to meditation today, I will say that I encourage you to meditate further in your own time at home. Maybe try to find 20 minutes a day to meditate, maybe in the morning, maybe in the evening before you go to bed, in order to ensure that you can continue to make progress in your meditation. In order to support that, the temple has designed this app called Mind Gem, which you can download onto your mobile phone in order to hear meditation instruction or set a time to meditate. And sometimes you don't want to hear meditation instruction for the whole of that time. You might find a 20-minute instructions and sit for half an hour, and it will give you a little chime at the end in order to bring you out to your meditation. Here we have meditation classes on a Tuesday and Thursday evenings. The meditation on a Tuesday is a little bit shorter normally, half an hour. On the Thursday it's 45 minutes long. Apart from that, every Saturday with the rest of Europe we have an English language meditation online, which you can log into via Zoom. And the Zoom one is the same as for the full moon meditation, which is coming up on Friday the 18th. Those Zoom details are ones that you can also use to log in for the DMEU Saturday meditations between 7 and 8. Full moon meditation is a little bit more elaborate, that we meditate, also light a candle in a little ceremony, and we hear a themed talk as well. This time it will be on building spiritual resilience, but it will be held in person here as well as online on that Friday the 18th of March. which also coincides with the start of our weekend retreat here as well. For the young men amongst you who might be interested in trying out being a monk for a while, there is the opportunity to do that in the month of June, we hope, this year, now that COVID has gone away, at least we assume it to have gone away more than usual. If you want to ordain as a monk for a month, you can do that. Sometimes being able to stay for the first 2 weeks is also acceptable as well. And the meditation retreat coming up here in the middle of the month, Friday night, Saturday, and then finishing on the Sunday afternoon. 8 precepts retreat, and the accommodation here on both sides is what we use for those who are sleeping over to join the retreat. I think if anyone is unhappy to stay over, you can talk to us about it, and it's possible to keep the retreat at home and come early in the morning, go back late at night, because I know some people still worry about staying over with strange bodies who may or may not be infectious or whatever. So yes, to encourage people to come back and join retreats, we'd be as flexible as possible. So that is the retreat coming up, and you notice the shorter web link there, which you can use to find the online sign-up. I think it's £75 for the weekend. That covers the cost of food. It's only 2 meals a day, but there is things that don't count as food, which you are offered in the evening, things like dairy products and chocolate, yes, just to keep up your strength in the evening. So finish off there, I think, unless there are any questions, comments or feedback that anyone would like to share at this time. Okay, you're buying the Naga stuff? Not entirely. Okay, but you don't ask about it.
Well, thank you very much, Lumpi. I always think of these sessions as sort of giving us better mental spatial awareness, being able to view life, or better able to view life, in a sort of more multifaceted way with a 360-degree lens. And the session this evening has really helped to probably give us greater sensitivity of the impact of our actions. And it helps to make us better empaths, I think, and actually attract a better life to ourselves because we're making better decisions. It makes us, as I think you mentioned, to sort of anticipate better in a much better way and consequently be a better human. So I hope you've got some good takeaways from this evening's talk. I would just like to point out there is a donation box just directly opposite me. The temple relies totally on charity in terms of its upkeep, the monks, the lay people, so please feel free to donate. But I'd like to close the session now, just as we started, by paying respect. So if you'd like to join me then, please pay respect by bowing to our teaching monk 3 times. Bow, bow, bow.
So may all of you be blessed with the clear sense of discretion and conscience in life to guide you wisely whatever ethical decisions you are making in your lives.
Sadhu. And please join us by paying respect to Buddha by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
And if anyone has a moment to help wipe down the chairs and pack away the chairs, that would be very helpful as well. Thank you.